There's a lot going on. I know you pay attention to many different issues, especially health related. What's the top issue you're looking at this week, sir?
Well, I think probably on the top of my list is Kennedy coming out on Tucker Carlson and basically reiterating what we knew, I would think about, I think 15 years ago. The Veristatin study that they just basically said, oh, it's a new revelation that there's a huge increase in autistic spectrum disorders, especially in young boys. And that's old. That's really old. You had a couple whistleblowers that came out years and years ago. For me, the issue was the hepatitis B vaccine. That was such an obvious depopulation ploy. It was a depopulation weapon. And I think I might have mentioned on your show here a couple of times, or maybe at least once, the whole Denver airport episode that I experienced. I ended up in Denver airport 3 days after they opened, and they were not really functioning well yet. And I was astonished to actually be guided along with everybody else looking for the luggage, because the luggage hadn't really been operating. And so we were sent via the concourses, and I ended up going through a tunnel that no longer is open, accessible to the public. And that tunnel had the most magnificent mural. It was gold leaf, very, very costly. And it was a dedication to the New World Order. I kid you not. It said it right on the magnificent mural. And then I got to the main concourse, and then I started to look around, and then I started to take pictures. And I was the first one that actually brought attention to the Denver airport murals. And I published a series of them in my book, Death in the Air, Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare, that came out 3 months before 9/11. Think about the title, Death in the Air.
Right.
Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare. And I submitted it to the FBI. I went down and I talked to Special Agent Dunton at the FBI headquarters in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and said, here are the pictures, here is my book. I have detailed who the globalist enemies are. They're actually in the neighborhood. I was exposing Henry Kissinger's good friend and colleague that started the American Berlin Academy. His name was Klaus Gronke. He was living up in that area. And at any rate, the bottom line was I'm in Denver airport and I'm looking around and I see the mining cart really close to the dedication capstone that was dedicated. That's the Denver airport dedication by two different segments of the Freemasons, a black segregated Freemason group and a white one. And I thought that was interesting. I took pictures of that. And then there was a mining cart, John, that had the elements silver and gold. They were mining for silver and gold very, very close to these murals that depicted genocide, massive genocide, just like we're witnessing today. And what really hit me, because I had done the book years earlier, Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola, where the symbol for the hepatitis virus was AUAG. That's silver and gold.
Right.
So if you're mining for depopulation, which is what the murals were depicting, and the dedication capstone and the art in the floor, that's where the mining cart is. It's right in the floor. Then you go to hepatitis B, which when you start to look at the origin of hepatitis B, you go to what's called AUAG, the Australian antigen. That's old historic fact in government records that I reprinted in black and white, including the United States government contracts under which numerous AIDS-like and Ebola-like viruses were bioengineered in labs. that I literally published in the book. It's what made the book a bestseller. The contracts. You can't argue with the contracts. So all they can do, and that all they've been doing with me all over these years, is they either try to discredit me as a pseudoscientist. You know, they can publish all of their garbage, even in the New England Journal of Medicine. It's been now proven to be completely biased and influenced by the pharmaceutical cartel, but they're going to come after Dr. Leonard Horowitz, who has about 36 or more peer-reviewed scientific publications, and claim he's a pseudoscientist, and we'll discredit him that way. Or, even better, we'll completely censor him and we'll completely ignore him in all of the media. So that's where Kennedy recently comes out and says there's an 1,134% increase, according to Viersten study done on a huge population, finding that the hepatitis B vaccine was the culprit causing the autistic spectrum increase. Well, I have to then go back to Horowitz on vaccines, the most successful life-saving treasure that I published. You're in the business, John, of saving lives. So am I. That's why we love each other. That's why we work together. The most successful publication that I ever did, life-saving publication, was Horowitz on vaccines, where I dealt with the hepatitis B vaccine. Today, you know, you've got hepatitis A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I mean, they literally created the mutants in the laboratories, genetically engineered the mutants that we call hepatitis. Well, Kennedy's talking about the hepatitis B vaccine, and I did this segment on hepatitis B vaccine, exposing how obviously genocidal it is. You can't possibly reconcile giving 12-hour-old infants whose immune systems are not even mature yet a hepatitis B vaccine that is given primarily for people at risk of blood-borne pathogenic transfer. You've got hepatitis is transferred via sex. Infants don't have sex. It's transferred via needle stick injuries. Infants are not injecting people with needles, using needles. So what is this? It is a clear depopulation weapon. That's what the hepatitis B vaccine is, and it always has been. So that is something I think this week, you know, God willing, if I get a chance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to freely distribute that. I'm going to publish Horowitz on vaccines online, and I'm going to post it for everybody to get a free download, and they can listen to it. It's a 2-hour program. But I heavily deal with the hepatitis and show it to be the classic example of fraud in healthcare and health science, because there's no question you can't even reconcile unless you integrate depopulation as a biological weapon. You cannot integrate and comprehend the hepatitis B vaccine. And now what does Kennedy come out with? Oh, we've just now discovered that this is one of the potentially the principal causes, along with the mercury that they said that they removed in 1990, the mercury that turns to methyl mercury that's highly toxic and neurologically damaging. This is what is sitting on nerves. When you had researchers who were investigating the mercury sitting on the children's nerves and seeing, Dr. Andrew Molden was the principal, fantastic MD, PhD, Canadian doctor, now passed away. He was very concerned. He was a colleague of mine who expressed to me on multiple occasions he's worried about his life, because life was being threatened. And then, you know, it's likely that they took him out. He was the top expert talking about how the mercury, once it's injected, especially via the hepatitis B vaccine given to And when the mercury sits on the nerves don't fire properly. And that means that the muscles then don't work properly. And because the muscles are not working, the perhaps best and earliest symptom, said Dr. Molden, is look at the children's eyes, because you see that the pupils go off center. They go either lateral or medial strabismus, it's called in medicine. It moves to the right or to the left. And then you can measure that. It's quantifiable. You can do an examination of how many children got vaccinated and then had this strabismus problem with their nerves. And so Molden, years ago, before he passed, came out with exactly what we're talking about now. You have autistic spectrum disorder skyrocketing. What has that done? It's allowed millions of children to be converted into burdens, financial burdens, psychosocial burdens on the poor families who have to deal with this. What about the educational system, the huge spike in special needs? What is that doing? Going back to the original issue that you've raised, John, the lacking intelligence, the ignorance. What does it do for society and the development of educated children when you now have to have your children engage in classrooms where the other children are autistic and have special needs? What's the burden on all of us, on the nation? And so you see this in a greater picture that the media doesn't want to address, Congress does not want to address. The only thing that's being addressed is lesser issues and diversions and distractions away from taking out the glory and greatness of the United States of America by destroying our population, by destroying the intelligence, by destroying the economy, by destroying everything that Satan and his forces in the global elite that literally control the entire woke and the DEI objectives, and really from the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, United Nations on down, they have their players positioned to influence politics, economics, and unfortunately America's demise. That in a nutshell is what we're witnessing. And hepatitis, the viruses, the lab creations, the bioweapons for depopulation, profitable depopulation. The pharmaceutical industrialists are making massive fortunes off of all the illness that they've created, including the cancers they don't want to talk about with related to COVID cancer. An article on medicalveritas.org goes into that. It's a peer-reviewed scientific publication that I published and reprinted in medicalveritas.org from Acta Scientifica Medical Journal. And it's a peer-reviewed journal that goes into how cancer, specifically leukemia, lymphoma, multiple myeloma, the lymphatic cancers, are directly related to the spike protein antigen that Dr. McCullough has a product for. He advertises on television for the spike protein remedy. Well, I think pretty much most of us need it now. Even if you haven't gotten vaccinated, if you got the virus, then you got the spike protein. If you got the vaccine, you got the spike protein. If you got near somebody shedding the virus or the spike protein, you probably have the spike protein. It is a perfect bioweapon for global depopulation, which is the objective of the global elite. And why primarily depopulation is so important to the global elite? Because smaller populations are easier to control.